Tonight, I'm sharing 4 stories that will make you question what really happens inside Yellowstone National Park after dark. The first begins with a routine patrol by the river, and by the end, you'll understand why one ranger never walks near the Firehole at night again. And before we start, if these stories keep you up at night, subscribe and ring the bell. I post new chilling encounters every single day. This account comes from Ryan, who worked seasonal ranger shifts in Yellowstone through his 20s. He'd grown up on the edge of Montana, familiar with the mountains and wilderness, but he said Yellowstone always felt different, alive in a way the woods at home never did. One September, he was assigned to night patrol near the Firehole River, where steam drifts off the surface and the air smells faintly of sulfur. It's a place where the earth feels thin, like the ground is breathing. Ryan didn't mind the shift. He liked the solitude, the hiss of the geysers in the distance, the way the stars burned sharp over the steaming water. But that night, the solitude didn't feel the same. He parked the truck by a trailhead, radio clipped to his vest, flashlight in hand, and started his walk. The trail ran close to the river, and he could see faint mist rising off the water, curling into the trees. After 10 minutes, he noticed something strange. The glow ahead glowed faintly, as though something lit it from within. At first, he thought it was headlights, maybe another ranger, but there was no road in that direction, only water and woods. He slowed. The glow intensified, not steady like a flashlight beam, but pulsing, fading, returning, like lanterns moving through fog. Ryan crouched, clicking off his light. The glow drifted closer, weaving between the trees on the opposite bank. At first, he thought it might be campers, though camping was forbidden that close to the thermal areas. But the movements were wrong. The lights swayed as though carried, but they didn't throw beams, didn't scatter across the mist. They floated in spheres, each the size of a fist, rising and sinking in slow arcs. 3 of them. Ryan's skin prickled. He told himself it was swamp gas, headlights reflecting some rational trick of light, but the longer he watched, the less it looked like any trick. Because the lights weren't random, they were moving in formation. They drifted together, fanned out, then rejoined, circling slowly like searchers combing through the steam. And as they moved, Ryan heard something new under the hiss of the river. Voices. Faint, low, just out of range to make out words. He pressed a hand to his radio, but didn't call it in. Who would believe him? Lights and voices in the mist, it would sound like a ghost story, not a ranger report. Still, he stood frozen, breath frosting in the cold air. Then, the lights crossed the river. Not with splashes or disturbance, they simply drifted across, hovering a foot above the surface, reflections rippling below them. Ryan stepped back instinctively. His boot crunched on gravel. The voices stopped. The lights paused mid-river. Then, slowly, they turned. No other way to describe it. Angled toward him. They began to glide his way. Ryan fumbled with his flashlight, flicking it on. A beam of white cut the mist, illuminating the lights. Except the beam passed right through them. They weren't reflections or beams. They were objects, self-contained, glowing faintly yellow like lantern flames, but no source. His radio crackled suddenly loud in the silence. Patrol 3, status check. The lights froze. Ryan slammed the transmit button. "Patrol 3, I'm fine, just on the Firehole trail." Static hissed, then, "Copy. Report in next checkpoint." When the radio went dead, Ryan realized the lights were now only 20 feet away. One rose higher, drifting level with his eyes. The glow wavered, like fire through fog. And in that glow, for a fraction of a second, he saw something inside. A face. Not clear, not detailed, just the impression of hollow eyes, mouth slightly open as if calling silently through the glass of its own light. Ryan's legs moved before his brain decided. He turned and sprinted back toward the truck, gravel scattering, mist swirling around him. Behind him, the river hissed louder, or maybe it was the sound of the lights following him. He didn't dare look back until he saw the reflection of his truck's headlights through the trees. When he reached it, he slammed the door, turned the ignition, and flooded the trail with beams. Nothing. The mist curled lazily, empty, harmless. No lights, no voices. But when he checked his watch, it was 3:17 a.m., hours later than he thought. He remembered leaving the trailhead around midnight. Somehow, the night had swallowed 3 hours. Ryan still works in the park, but he swears he never goes near the Firehole after dark. And when visitors ask about strange lights in the steam, he says what all rangers are trained to say. It's just reflections, nothing more. But he doesn't believe it.
The second story begins with a ranger checking on a group of backcountry campers at Slough Creek, and by the end, you'll understand why he never trusts an abandoned site again. And before we begin, if stories like this keep you hooked, subscribe and ring the bell. I post new chilling encounters every single day. This account comes from Laura, a 33-year-old seasonal ranger who worked backcountry patrols in Yellowstone for 5 summers. She wasn't easily shaken. She'd pulled drunk tourists away from bison, broken up fights at campgrounds, and hiked solo through grizzly country. But she swears what happened at Slough Creek still unsettles her years later. It started with a routine check. A permit flagged a group of campers scheduled to leave that morning, but their backcountry tag hadn't been returned. Rangers always double-checked. It could mean an injury or that someone overstayed. Laura set out late afternoon, hiking the trail into Slough Creek. The air was crisp, the meadows glowing gold in the September light. She remembered thinking how calm it felt, how she almost enjoyed the solitude after a busy season. The trail curved along the creek, and soon she saw the campsite. From a distance, it looked occupied. Tents still pitched, smoke curling from a fire ring, a cooler and folding chairs scattered. She called out, "Backcountry Patrol, anyone here?" No answer. As she got closer, something felt wrong. The tents looked new, bright fabric, no sag, but there was no movement. The fire smoked steadily, but she didn't smell wood. It smelled faintly metallic, like heated stone. She stepped into camp and froze. Food sat half-prepared on a table. Bread sliced, peanut butter jar open, a knife beside it. A journal lay on a camp chair, pages fluttering in the breeze. A pair of boots sat neatly by one tent flap. But there were no people. She checked the tents, empty. Sleeping bags unzipped, still indented as if someone had just gotten out. Her skin prickled. She called again, louder. "Park Service, hello!" The words fell flat. No bird song answered, no wind in the trees. She keyed her radio. "Base, this is Patrol 7 at Slough Creek. I've got an occupied site with no occupants. Looks like abandoned mid-use." Static hissed. Then, "Copy 7. Any sign of wildlife or injury?" She glanced around. "Negative. Gear's here, food's out, no damage. It looks like they stepped away 5 minutes ago." Another pause. Then, "Secure the site. We'll send support in the morning." Laura didn't like the idea of waiting. Everything in the camp screamed, interrupted. She decided to take notes, photograph the scene, and check the immediate area. That's when she noticed the footprints. In the dirt near the fire ring, several sets of boot prints circled. Fresh. She crouched, tracing one with her glove. The edges were sharp, undisturbed. But there were too many. The permit listed 4 campers. She counted at least 9 distinct prints. And they led everywhere. Into the meadow, toward the creek, even into the brush where branches snapped under her boots when she followed. She backed out quickly. Returning to the fire, she knelt to examine it again. The smoke rose steady, gray and thin. She prodded the ashes with a stick. Cold. Her mouth dry. Cold ashes didn't smoke. The wind shifted suddenly, carrying a faint sound. Voices. She spun toward the meadow. Across the grass, through the tall stalks, she saw movement. Shadows weaving, ducking, slipping between the stems. Not animals. Too tall. She raised her radio. "Patrol 7, I've got movement in the meadow, multiple figures." Static. She lowered it, heart pounding. The voices grew clearer, laughter, conversation, but muffled, like overheard from underwater. She thought she heard her own name. The shadows moved closer, flickering in and out of sight. She backed toward the tents, pulse hammering. Then, as suddenly as it started, everything went still. The voices cut off. The meadow stilled. When she turned back to the camp, it was gone. Not the meadow, not the creek, the entire campsite. The tents, the chairs, the boots, the half-made sandwich, all gone. Bare dirt stretched where it had been, grass pressed flat only where she herself had walked. She staggered, breath caught in her throat. She whispered, "No." Her radio crackled suddenly. "7, status check." She fumbled it to her mouth. "The site, it's gone. I don't know how to explain it. Everything's gone." Silence. Then, "7, repeat." She turned in a slow circle, scanning for any sign she hadn't imagined it. Nothing. No gear, no prints, no smoke. And then, on the ground by her boots, she saw the journal. The same one from the camp chair. Its pages flapped open. She picked it up. Inside, the last entry read, "Something in the meadow. We heard it calling. If we don't come back." The line cut off mid-sentence. Her throat tightened. She slammed the journal shut and stuffed it in her pack, hurrying back down the trail without looking behind her. When she returned in daylight with a support team, the meadow was empty. They found no trace of any camp. The permit group was never located. Official records marked them as missing, presumed lost. Laura still has the journal. She won't read it again. And when visitors ask about backcountry camping, she gives the same warning every ranger does. Stay visible. Stay together. And if you hear your name called from the meadow, don't answer.
The third story involves a lone man, a ranger's warning, and the geyser basin that seemed to swallow him whole. And before we begin, if these stories keep you wondering about what hides in plain sight, subscribe and ring the bell. I share new chilling encounters every single day. This account comes from Miles, a ranger stationed near the upper Geyser Basin one summer in the late 2000s. He'd worked the park long enough to know the danger wasn't just the wildlife, it was the ground itself. Tourists wandered off boardwalks all the time, not realizing how thin the earth could be. Beneath a crust of dirt or grass, scalding water seethed inches below. Most of the time, rangers caught them in time, but not always. Miles said he'd noticed the man early that evening, a lone figure, maybe mid-40s with thinning hair, a worn flannel, and a small canvas bag slung across his chest. He wasn't doing anything illegal, just standing at the edge of the boardwalk, staring into one of the pools. Miles approached with his usual tone, firm but friendly. "Sir, I'll need you to stay on the walkway. It's for your safety." The man turned, smiled faintly, and said, "I'm not stepping off." His eyes looked tired, distant as if he hadn't slept in days. Miles nodded, walked a loop, and came back around 20 minutes later. The man was still there, staring into the same pool.
Steam drifted in thick waves, tinted orange by the sunset. "Everything all right, sir?" The man glanced over. "You ever wonder what's under there?" Miles hesitated. "Hot water, sulfur, steam vents. It's dangerous." The man shook his head slowly. "No, I mean deeper." He tapped the rail lightly, leaned closer, then whispered, "Sometimes I hear them calling." Miles' stomach tightened. He chalked it up to exhaustion, maybe mental illness. It wasn't uncommon for people to drift into the park carrying their troubles. Still, something about the way the man stared into the pool unsettled him. As dusk fell, Miles made another pass. The man was gone. Relieved, he assumed the stranger had headed back toward the lodge. But then he saw the canvas bag, sitting neatly on the rail. Inside, a notebook, half full. No wallet, no ID, just page after page of short entries. Dreamed of the steam again. Heard the voices by Old Faithful. Couldn't sleep. They said I should come closer. Miles snapped the notebook shut, uneasy. That's when he noticed footprints, fresh, crisp, leading off the boardwalk toward the pools, straight across the fragile earth. He radioed immediately. "Possible off-walk trespasser in Basin. Footprints heading south. Request backup." Dispatch confirmed, but backup was 15 minutes out. Miles followed the prints carefully, staying on the wood. They led toward a section of bubbling pools, steam rising thick and acrid. Through the mist, he saw the man, standing ankle-deep in crusted soil, arms at his sides, staring straight into the largest vent. Steam poured upward, veiling his figure. "Sir, step back! That ground can collapse!" The man didn't move. Miles raised his voice. "I'm not kidding! You'll die if you keep going!" Still, nothing. Then the man spoke, voice thin over the hiss of steam. "They're waiting." And he stepped forward. Miles lunged instinctively, but the man was too far. The earth cracked under his boot, steam blasted up, obscuring everything. Miles braced, expecting screams, collapse, boiling water. But there was only silence. The mist thinned. The man was gone. Not fallen. Gone. No splash, no collapse, no trace, just empty earth, bubbling as it always had. Backup arrived minutes later. Together, they searched the area, scanned the pools with thermal equipment, combed nearby trails. No sign. Only the footprints remained, ending abruptly at the edge of the vent. Miles handed over the notebook. He never saw it again. But he remembers the last line written, dated the very day the man disappeared. "If I step through, maybe I'll finally see them." Miles doesn't know what the man meant, but he swears he can still hear voices when he walks the basin alone at dusk. And whenever visitors lean too far over the rail, he warns them, not just about the heat, but about the silence that follows when someone steps where they shouldn't.
The fourth story takes place in one of the park's historic lodges, where staff discovered that sometimes the voices you hear after hours don't belong to anyone alive. And before we begin, if you're the kind of person who loves stories that feel just a little too close to real, subscribe and ring the bell. I post new nightmare fuel every single day. This account comes from Amy, who worked summers at Yellowstone's Old Faithful Inn while in college. Built in 1904, the lodge is a massive, creaking structure of stone and timber, famous for its 7-story lobby and gigantic stone fireplace. Guests loved the rustic charm. Staff, however, knew its other reputation: the noises at night. Amy worked front desk evenings, checking in late arrivals and answering phones. The shift ended around midnight, when the lodge quieted down. Guests retired to their rooms, lights dimmed in the cavernous lobby. The whole place took on a different personality. Still beautiful, but unsettling. Every creak magnified in the silence. Her first week, an older housekeeper warned her, "Don't listen if you hear voices in the basement." Amy laughed it off. Voices? The housekeeper just shook her head. "You'll see." For days, nothing happened. She adjusted to the rhythm, registering guests, answering questions about geyser schedules, handing out maps. After midnight, she sometimes stayed to help night audit or refill brochures. But one night, while walking down the back hallway near the service stairs, she heard it. Voices. Not a single voice, several. Faint, muffled, as though a conversation was happening directly beneath her feet. She stopped. The basement lay below, but at that hour it should have been empty. Maintenance staff went home at 10. Laundry crews left earlier. She crouched slightly, pressing her ear to the wooden floor. The voices sharpened, a man's low tone, a woman's higher pitch, overlapping. She thought she caught laughter, soft, almost polite. Her throat tightened. She crept down the service stairs, flashlight in hand. The air grew cooler, tinged with the smell of damp stone. The basement stretched in a maze of storage rooms, laundry machines, and supply closets. Fluorescents flickered overhead, buzzing faintly. "Hello?" Amy called. Her voice echoed too far, like the space was larger than it should have been. Silence. She walked the corridor, peering into doorways. Empty. Just shelves of extra bedding, stacks of brochures, a mop bucket. Her own footsteps sounded too loud. Then the voices resumed. Behind her. Amy spun, heart hammering. The hallway was empty. She backed up, beam of her flashlight skittering across stone walls. The voices rose again, this time from the far end of the hall, beyond the old boiler room door. She knew the room was sealed. Maintenance had bolted it shut. The boiler had been replaced years earlier, but staff still called it the boiler room. The voices murmured steadily. Clearer now, but she still couldn't make out words. She approached slowly, pressing her ear to the heavy wood. A phrase slipped through, distorted but sharp. Her name. Amy. Her blood ran cold. She stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. When she gathered herself and leaned in again, silence. She bolted up the stairs, breath ragged, and refused to return to the basement the rest of her shift. The next morning, she asked the housekeeper about it. The woman gave her a long look, then said, "I told you, don't listen." She wanted to press, but the woman walked away. For a few weeks, nothing happened. She convinced herself it had been stress, imagination, the acoustics of old wood and stone. But then came July, when tourist season peaked. The lodge filled every night. Amy worked double shifts, often closing after midnight. That night she stayed late helping with front desk audit. The lobby was nearly silent, just the groan of wood beams and the occasional pop from the stone fireplace. She heard it again. Not from below this time, from the lobby itself. Voices rising up the chimney. She froze. It sounded like a crowd, dozens of murmurs, layered one over another, as if a gathering took place deep inside the massive stone flue. Some laughed, some whispered, others muttered in fragments. She stepped closer. The great fireplace loomed, its iron grates cool, no fire burning, yet from inside came the echo of conversation, faint but indisputable. Her skin prickled. She crouched, leaning close. One voice cut through the rest, sharp and amused. "You shouldn't be here." She jerked back so hard she hit her head on the mantel. When she blinked away the pain, the fireplace was silent. Amy didn't tell anyone.
She thought she'd be dismissed as overtired, but she grew jumpy at night, avoiding both the basement and the fireplace after hours. The final straw came in August. She worked late again, returning brochures to the basement storage. The halls were cool, damp, faintly echoing. She forced herself to stay calm, humming quietly as she walked. Then she noticed something that made her stop cold. One of the doors, the boiler room, stood ajar. She knew it was supposed to be sealed. Her flashlight beam shook as she raised it. The room beyond gaped black, deeper than it should have been. The light seemed to vanish into the dark instead of illuminating it. She heard voices, louder than ever. Conversations overlapping, laughter, a man repeating her name. Her skin crawled. She whispered, "Who's there?" The voices stopped instantly. Then, knocking. Slow, deliberate. From inside the dark. One knock. Pause. Two more. The sound reverberated through the stone, rattling the door. Amy bolted, flashlight beam swinging wildly as she sprinted up the stairs. She quit a week later. When she told her manager she couldn't stay, he didn't press. He just nodded slowly, as though he'd heard it before. Years later, Amy swears she still dreams of the voices, dozens of them, overlapping, whispering her name, always from just below the floor. And she never, ever stays in the lodge past midnight.